Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations, where we share experiences from our hearts to empower others. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations. Today we have a returning guest, Ronald Fellion, author of Truth Beyond the Earthly Matrix. Welcome, Ronald.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome. It's been a while since we've done this, and we planned this as a group discussion, and I've been receiving a few emails saying that people couldn't make it, and I didn't even think about us doing this right at a July 4th holiday, so I bet you a lot of people are went out of town too. So anyway, I wanted to get into, there's so many things that have been going on, and I was catching up on some videos that you've made, and you really got my attention on some, and I was like, wow, that's completely different than anything I've heard before. And so I'm very interested in talking about it. But one of the things that I really wanted to talk about before we get into your videos is just like the energy that's happening right now in this earthly matrix. What's going on in the United States always affects the whole planet, always. And we're dealing right now with all the stuff about immigration and the children that are being ripped apart from their families. We're dealing with a lot of racial issues coming up, and I'm seeing a lot of things in the media where you've got things that you wouldn't even normally see, that it's hard to imagine that this is actually occurring, or if this is something that's staged. I just don't even know what to make of it. When there's a white mother at a swimming pool and some black children come into the pool, and she's running them off and telling them that they're not wanted there, that they need to leave. We're seeing things like that are being put out in the media. Or we're getting these stories about these big detention centers with all these children of immigrants and how they're separated from their families. And when we think about that as human beings, and we think of how you separate children from their parents, that's horrifying to us. But I thought what's really interesting is there are children homes in the United States. There's CPS that on a daily basis is removing children from their parents' homes, and sometimes over reasons that make zero sense whatsoever. It can be something like they're not giving them vaccines, or what they've named their child. You know, it's or somebody's made a phone call and accused them of something that has never taken place. For their protection, they have to put them, or they're going to put them in a children's home or in foster care. And so that's been happening forever. But now, because it's about immigration, all of a sudden this is becoming a huge battle. But when it happens within our own country with people that are citizens, it's not even being talked about. And so I'm looking at this as a program that's really being put out there just to create more division and more hatred between us as blacks, whites, Hispanics, you know, Persians, Arabs, whatever, because this is becoming so, you can't be here if you're a Muslim, and you came here illegally, you got to get, you know, be deported, you're going to be separated from your children, and we're all just attacking each other. And you know, I don't like the idea of borders. I think it's kind of crazy that we live on this planet and we're not free to just explore it however we choose to. But I do see this as a program, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it and how you see it. And I wanted Micah to share on it, because she's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up, because I know that I saw something she posted on Facebook, and I wanted her to be able to share what she was feeling about it.
Well, why don't you go ahead and do that first?
Okay.
Go ahead, Micah. Go ahead. See what she wants to say.
Okay. Well, thanks, Patricia, for bringing up the stuff that goes on in the U.S., because my perception when it comes to children being separated from their families, I mean, historically, it's been in the U.S. and it's probably been in other countries and cultures for, who knows how long. So for me and for other people I know, it's like, if it is, or however this is rolling out, it's unfortunate that we have not been privy to this going on for who knows how many years or decades or centuries. And I would hope that, if people would look at history, or at least look at examples of history of how this has been something that's gone on in the U.S., whether people like it or not, and, see that connection so that people are no longer in the shock kind of phase. And then when the media rolls out a news story, not saying that this is this is just a story, but sometimes I feel like these things kind of roll out and then they get pushed, under the rug again, but, stuff still happens. My intention when I first brought up my Facebook post was just because actually for several years, I felt like there was a racial dynamic and spirituality had been interwoven with that, particularly when it comes to this, I don't know if you want to call it a corrupt demiurge, or how the Matrix likes to, split things with quote unquote black and white. And from my perspective, it's like in the spiritual community or religious community, the color white, or it's not really a color, but white and black have a particular attributes. White in some ways being more positive and black being more negative. And so I felt like that whole dynamic being presented out there is kind of what may have started a division. So it's not necessarily like a human started thing. It's something that may have occurred off planet or some other, we talk about the godly matrix. So it may have been like a God matrix type of thing to start pushing that agenda out there. And people were fed that, influenced by that. And so now we have today where we have historically thought that people who look white or are white have higher consciousness, they're more beautiful, they have all these more positive attributes, and someone who's black or darker skin is deemed as being negative, dirty, dangerous, that sort of thing. And even in other cultures, not just in America, but looking like in India historically, when you see so many of their deities, they're very lighter skinned, and with that caste system, the lighter skinned you are, typically the more wealth you have, the more desirable you are. Where people there who are darker skinned are considered to be the outcast and treated differently. So that was where part of where my dynamic and my desire to speak came from. And the other thing was how I feel like in a number of spiritual circles, that race is not something that people talk about, or it's put in a blanket kind of subject. Let's just look at love and light. Let's look at all oneness and things. And I feel like, yes, we'd all like to get to that point, but some of us, based on our experiences for ourselves, our family members, what we've seen, are not in that place. And part of our spiritual healing, I think, can come from race, where we have, in some cases, literally been divided, like my parents and my grandparents growing up in segregated America. And, even for myself, growing up mostly in predominantly white neighborhoods and white schools, and, some of my friends as well, and having different racial dynamics and some level of division and lack of speaking there. Because, in most schools that I know of, you don't get to really talk and listen to each other and receive in a way in which we can come up to some real solutions and real understandings of why we feel the way that we feel about each other. And also that level of self-healing for ourselves, instead of projecting at other people, and so to speak, it would be, I would say, being able to heal and truly love ourselves. And I think race is a part of that. Mm-hmm. Me being Black African-American in this society, a lot of us in some ways buy into the self-hatred. And it's that what quote unquote white people think matters more than what we think, or that it's somehow better than us. And sometimes someone like myself, and I know other people, we have, whether we like it or not, been subconsciously subjugated to that. And working through that and healing through that, not to come up and say like we're better than other people, but that our feelings, that our opinions, whether it's about race or otherwise, do matter, and they're worth listening to. And we have to undergo our own healing ourselves in regards to love our skin color, our hair, our being, our presence, that we have something valuable to contribute here, whether we are, quote unquote, a minority or not. So, I mean, for me, the subject's like a very multi-layer type of discussion. And, you know, historically, when I talk about these things, I'm usually the only person of color who talks about them, which is totally fine. But it's funny being in that situation. I always tell myself, because it's like, well, I hope I'm not speaking for everybody who has my skin color and my heritage, because I'm not. But at the same time, I appreciate an opportunity to speak and to say what I have to say and to listen to what other people have to say. Because I think this might be maybe the third time in all my years that, maybe except for one class that I took in college, where I got a chance to speak on this matter. Of course, this wasn't in like a space like this. It was at a writing conference, and then one time at a job where there was some racial tension amongst the student body. But yeah, I say all that to say that I do think there are some real things going on just based on my perspective. But it, you know, I feel like the more we kind of push it aside and don't have discussions, and also don't work on our own level of self-healing, as well as the way that we perceive other people, or the way that we are subjugated to how society thinks we need to perceive other people, and the more we, you know, segregate ourselves, no matter how many discussions we have or how many times we interact with people of another lineage. I mean, race itself shouldn't be like a real thing as in black and white, because I do feel humanity is technically, it's one race. And I feel like it is diverse. I don't know if we came out as all one color or one thing, but I do feel we are a diversity of shapes, colors, and sizes, and we're meant to be that way. And so seeing color itself, to me, with different skin colors, I think is fine. It's just not associating that somebody of one skin color is better or not better than another. And so maybe we can get to that point. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but it's something that I've been working through. And I brought it to Facebook, and I've wanted to bring it in other realms, just to give people something to consider. Because I've had to look at myself in so many ways, because I know how this has affected me, and I think it's affected a lot of people, both, you know, you could say in the spiritual community, but in every other aspect of life as well. That's my first input.
Well, thank you for sharing. You know, I just wanted to go ahead and bring it up and talk about it, because I felt like with the immigration stuff that was coming up right now, and then with the things that we're constantly seeing brought up about racism, it's obviously been put out there. And just from my interpretation and the way that I've connected to the energy behind what I call the new faction that's running the planet, it is the white brotherhood. And I feel like that's why it's being brought to the forefront. Now, I have a whole different perspective, and that's where, you know, Ronald and I were talking. We're completely different in the way that we view things, but then we have a lot that are similar, just like David and I. I mean, we're night and day on the way that we view things, and then we just come together in other areas that make us work. Like, we make no sense, but we work. But so I would like for Ronald to share his perspective on what's happening, because he's got a very interesting way of looking at it.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up about what Micah said, I never really thought about the black-white issue in terms of the light and dark when it comes to the spiritual concept of the light being positive, the dark being negative. And you may have a very valid point that perception may have come from the duality concept of black and the white, you know, with light being positive and dark being negative. I mean, that I never really thought of it in those terms before. I think you may very well have something with that as to where it came from. That would be a good thing to, like I say, put out there to educate people spiritually to understand that. And it's, like I said, that's a very interesting point, I think, on that. Now, as far as what we're talking about with the what's going on in the world, I have a tendency to see things, the reality around me, the world, the representation of it, as a reflection of my internal state, my internal being. You can even call it the mass consciousness type thing, our consciousness, the reality and the things that are going on in the world are showing us what is happening to the consciousness level of us and the world around us. when you see a lot of disruption, a lot of chaos, and those kind of things that are going on, particularly now when you start seeing, like we were talking about earlier, the amount of rain that's falling in different places, the flooding. There are snow in the middle of summertime in different places. Water is consciousness. Water is, everything on this planet has water in it. And that abundance of water indicates to me that there is a change of consciousness inside of myself, because it's a reflection. The fires, it's cleaning and burning, and the volcanoes that are going off, again, another reflection. We were talking the other day, I think like a train accident, train coming off of the track. The trains are representing a program. The programs of this reality that are being derailed. The conflicts and things you see going on are the programs that are not flowing as they're supposed, well, not flowing as they really would like to be, but they're coming into conflict with each other now because of the change inside of us. The change in our awareness and consciousness is causing that conflict, and that change in us and the conflict is being reflected in the reality around us. That's how I see that going on. And you were talking earlier, Patricia, about the children from the Mexican immigrants and so on. Well, how many people are in prison, and their children have been taken away from them when they're in prisons? There are millions of people there, and as you said, the Child Protective Services come in. It's a matter of society attempting to create an issue, and yet should it be done and dealt with? Sure, it should be, but they're putting a focus on an issue and blowing it out of proportion. It was the same thing that happened when you had some of those shootings that they had before, when you had 20 or 30 people that were killed in a nightclub. And people were getting bent all out of shape. We needed to do this, we needed to do that, because 20 or 30 people were killed. So what I did that time, and I sat down and I did a study of how many people die in the United States every year and what they die from. You realize over 600,000 people die in hospitals alone from mistreatment, malpractice, and so on. And yet there's no outrage over that, but yet everyone gets upset because 30 or 40 people died because it was focused upon. It's the same thing going on with this immigration issue. Yes, it's an attempt to have an agenda. There's a point behind it. Why do they want the focus on that? Remember before about the wall, about the tariffs and everything that's going on with the importation and the fees that they're adding on to things. And there's agenda behind the reason that they're focusing on that issue. Does it need to be dealt with? Sure. But is it out of proportion as they're trying to portray it? No. When you look at the overall amount of what's going on compared to other things. Like I said, there's millions of people in prisons and torn away from their families all the time. It's the same kind of a concept, but nobody cares about it. Mm-hmm. It's like I said, it's just, there's an agenda behind it in the focus that they're doing on it for that particular reason. And it's about the separation. It's about creating division. And again, I think that is within ourselves. It's a reflection of us, that we are breaking away from some of the traditional programs that we are changing. And I see that as a reflection of that from internally.
And I didn't even think about the prisons. That's that's a bigger point too. I mean, you look at that, and now it's like private industry. It's a corporation, and these kids are definitely being taken away from their parents, either sent to live in children's homes or foster care, or with other relatives that may not even really want the children. And so, yeah, I see that. I feel like that when we're focused on just like one particular race or on this immigration issue, it's something meant for a greater agenda. So then I would ask myself, what's behind the focus? So what is it really doing? And what I see happening is I see that every time that one of these issues comes into play, it's a greater clampdown on society. That's what I see. It's bringing in more government control and also more division between human beings. And it's also, every time that we're affected by that, it's also taken our awareness off of ourselves. So like when you're saying, Micah, how you feel, like sometimes when I look at someone, like when Obama was elected for president and everybody was like, yay, we've got our first black president. And I went, his mom's white. How do you have your first black president because his skin happens to be brown? what does that mean? You know what I mean? If it's,
well, yeah, I know what you mean, but it's kind of going to, I guess, start to say semantics. I think historically, and I cannot quote everything in the Constitution, but a lot of people, I don't do this as much anymore, but as someone, you know, people sometimes will consider me biracial and say I'm not. The closest white that I have is my great-grandfather. But there's like, I think particularly in what I would call the Black community, maybe y'all heard of him now, but it's like somebody who is half Black, half white, because historically they have been considered Black. People will kind of take that as, oh, you must be Black.
mm-hmm.
But that's not always the case with everyone who is biracial. I mean, I don't know if Barack Obama considers himself Black. I never paid attention. But I know there are people in my sphere who I know who are biracial, who consider themselves to be biracial, and some who consider themselves to be Black. But I totally get what you're saying, because, yeah, there's some people who just kind of throw that out there, and maybe he does, but you're right. He still has a mom who's white. You can't change that. So.
Yeah. Well, see, I guess what I'm saying, like, I started to realize, like, there's no way that we're going to ever be able to get, you're not going to end that prejudice on this planet. I don't feel like everyone's just going to come together in one moment and embrace each other on this planet, because I feel like we're living on a planet of duality where there's always light, dark, good, bad. And if it's a spiritual thing that's making someone that's got brown skin feel like they're not good enough, then it would be the same thing for me. Like, if I look at, let's just go with like my childhood and the experiences that I've shared before, how can somebody make me feel better about myself? No matter what, it wouldn't matter what anyone would say or do to try to make me feel good about myself. It has to be something that I do inside of me.
Yes. No, I totally agree. And I probably shouldn't, I don't know if I should say spiritual as much as like distorted spirituality, because I mean, there's so many ways to put spirituality, but just from what I've seen and just from my own experiences with religion and just physical images, when people associate religion, it's like the white angelic angels and the deep dark devils and things like that.
Well, the white angelic angels are pretty scary.
Well, yeah, and then that's the thing. But I also think they're kind of off-planet, beings. You know, some of them really are. But even my own level of color association growing up, because when I would go to churches and even with my friends and other things, that's a lot of what I would see. And darkness was like that of not nearly being as attractive and this and that. But about, yes, your own inner healing, I feel like from some other groups that I'm a part of that are particularly centered on women of color, that's what we're kind of coming to, is that it is about, you have to heal yourself. You learn to love yourself regardless of the challenges that you face, because you're right. I mean, there are people who may perceive me some kind of way because of the color of my skin. And I don't know if it's even conscious anymore as much as it is subconscious, because as someone, like, this is one thing that always gets on my nerve as someone who's Black, is that a lot of media portrayals of Black people tend to be in a very, I think, negative or disempowering sight. And the slave narrative and the struggle narrative is just played over and over and over again. And yeah, that might be some aspect to truth, but that's not all that we are. It's not just a struggle narrative. It's not just every other slave movie that we have to see over and over again. I think I lost my train of thought, but like seeing that and going through that is realizing that, we're more than that we can truly love ourselves for this physical vessel that we're in, with this color that we're in, with this hair we have, and this and that, through whatever people say. Because I really feel like, honestly, when you do come to that level of true self-love, yeah, you're going to have people who don't want to give you the time of day, but also more often than not, you do find that life, or it's just your greater soul or greater being, will bring you to people in alignment who love you for who you are. And not being colorblind, but they love you for your skin color. They love you for your hair. And you love someone else for their skin color and their hair, whether you want to call it race, as in white or Black or brown or yellow, Hispanic, Native American, whatever that may be. But yeah, there is a lot of self-healing involved, and I'm glad to see there is more of that. I wish there Unfortunately, when you look at mainstream media discussions, you're not going to get that, because even if you look at mainstream media, it's always like, why do we have race problems? Why do we have blah, blah, blah? But it's always like a problem, and always a question, but there's never intent on some real level of solution. There's never intent on healing, because if there was, I mean, why would they even be here on television or in mainstream or offstream, however you want to call it, talking about this stuff?
Yeah.
So yes, I do agree. There is a level of, there has to be a level of self-healing for everyone. And I know I encourage like more people of color in this instant, because of how I know some of us feel or have felt in society, that we discover that more, so that we can start moving through the things that keep us angry, that make us feel down. Not that we shouldn't have those feelings, but that we don't stay stuck. It's so important not to stay stuck and realize that our humanity matters. It is a contribution. And who we are, who we look like, is just as everybody else. It does take work, but I always feel it's a journey that's worth undertaking, just like the other things that we have to move through, whether it's our family, whether it's other lifetimes, all kinds of stuff we have to deal with in this, as you said, 3D reality that's probably always going to be this way on some level until, who knows when.
I think one of the biggest issues with all this is what people have to work on doing is, you talk about the loving yourself is there, but we get caught up in the sense of identifying ourselves as something with something. So as long as we identify ourselves with one group or another group, as long as we start, and that goes with everything. It goes into religions, it goes into clubs, it goes into whatever it may be. As long as you start identifying yourself to your external identity, whether it's a club, or whether it's the color of your skin, or whether it's the clothes you're wearing, whatever it may be, you're going to be subject to separation from others, because you've already separated yourself out from one group of people simply by what you're focusing on for yourselves. And I think we have to work on getting past our sense of who and what we are tied to anything that's external, and bring it back internal. And it's going to take a while, but I think the conflicts that we're having now are showing that it's happening. I really do, because it seems they're focusing on the intensity of them, but it indicates to me that a change is going on internally for ourselves, and that's affecting that world around us. And it may get worse before it gets better, because it's an attempt to hold on to the old programs, and we're moving past that.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to share, David?
No, I'm just listening to what y'all are saying. It's pretty interesting.
Well, we've talked before about this. It's really interesting. The more that we've seen racism put out in the public, the less we experience it on a personal level. Like when we're out and you'll see the intensity of the racism in the media. And so you're, in an area where you're in a group of Black and white people and Hispanic and whatever, and you're kind of expecting, well, what's going to happen? Is someone going to be upset? Is there going to be some kind of racial tension? And we don't experience that personally. We're in a store and somebody comes up to us of a different skin color. We have conversation. It might be about even sports, which might not even care about, but it just happens. We'll be in a grocery store and some, person will come up to us and start talking to us about something, and we'll be there like 10, 15 minutes having a conversation, and we're all getting along normal. We're not having all these issues that the media's putting out there. So to some extent, yeah, we definitely know it does exist, and we definitely know that there's agendas behind it. But then there's just on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people they just want to be what we're talking about, a human being. They don't really care, but maybe they think they're supposed to, so that's the way they present themselves to their friends, to their family, when really one-on-one, they just want to have a conversation and connect the same way that the next person does.
So they're buying into a sense of identity, and we have to get away from having that as an external sense of identity and who and what we are. The more we become attached to it, the more it limits us. And like I said, it's a separation agenda. It's a separation program in an attempt to keep those programs going. And as long as we can understand that and recognize them as being programs, and we're changing within ourselves, it is going to change externally. It has to.
Yeah. It is always an inside job, right?
Yeah.
Well, so now this is interesting because as we were talking about healing, so one of the things that I was going to share is, like when we enter this universe, we come in as, and I guess I don't know how we each come in, but some of us come in highly consciously aware, and we experience all these traumas in this role play. And so it takes the awareness that we have, or our consciousness, and it lowers that level of consciousness to the point to we don't remember who we are. We don't know why we're here. So we're just in these roles and we're playing out these roles. So if we agree that trauma exists, and which, most of us, if we look back over our lives, trauma could exist from your parents, from being bullied in school, from, marriages that you've had, on so many different levels. If we experience traumas, then to me, that means that we have to experience those lower levels of consciousness for experiential purposes in this universe. So you've done a video on, does healing actually exist, or is it another program? So I'd like for you to share what your perspective on that is, because that's really interesting too.
Okay, well, when you're talking about the things that are going on internally within us are, well, what they would call genetic, but it's memories. And if you remember that all of this is going on simultaneously, that as we are changing those things that you're talking about, the problems, the issues, the trauma, as we're dealing with those in our lives, we are actually changing the entire genetic line of our family. We're bringing aspects of ourselves back together, is what we're doing. As we deal with those issues and we heal them, we're bringing more and more of our aspects together on our journey towards our soul. One of the things I talked about with the concept of healing is that, in my understanding and my experiences of time, every moment within time being a separate and independent moment from every other moment in time. It's like if you watch a movie on television, every scene in that movie is a single picture put together in a forward motion in order for us to see the movie play out as action. But the reality is every single one of those scenes is a separate individual snapshot. Our universe, our reality, is exactly the same way. All that exists in the universe is simply a series of individual snapshots. So when you're talking about the concept of healing yourself, when you are in a particular vibration, that vibration is never going to be any different as long as you stay in that vibration. If you're listening to radio station 590, you can want to listen to radio station 1000 all you want, and you're not going to get it because you're stuck on 190. So you don't have to do anything to 590 to get to 1000 except change the vibration. And it's the same thing within our bodies. When you want to heal yourself or move to a better state, all you're doing is changing from one of those snapshots of moment in time to another, which is another single vibration. So there's no real healing process because everything already is and it exists as it is. You can't change what already is. You're simply moving to another position. You're looking at another picture in which maybe what you had doesn't exist at the level that you have it then, or maybe it's completely gone. And that's how the idea that people can have what they call a miraculous healing overnight or instantly, or it can happen. In medical science, when they tell you how the body works, that is impossible in their realm because everything has to take time. The body can do this, the body can't do this. Well, all that happens is the individual moves from one vibration to another vibration, which what they had does not exist within that vibration. So there's really no healing because the physical body isn't real to start with. You're simply energetic presence. It's an illusional projection of what and who and what you are. And you can change the vibration of what you're seeing simply by changing the snapshot. Now, we think we have to do it in a linear fashion. So we have to, if you get cut, you have to have it start to heal itself. It starts to get a scab, bleeding stops, you get the scab, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Each one of those little steps is actually a individual, independent moment in space-time. But we think we have to do them in a linear fashion. We don't. That's how miraculous healings or instant healings take place, is that we're moving and shifting from one vibration to another. When I used to do the energy work for people, the toning and so on, I would take them to a different vibrational level, and it would change them temporarily, at least. because then they would want to go back to the same vibration they're in, and that's why they end up in the same problem. But I would give them that little jump start to show them the other vibration to where they could move beyond what they had. But we choose to stay in that vibration where we are, and that's why we end up staying sick, why we continue to have problems, because we own that vibration and we don't want to let go of it. But it's simply a matter of shifting a vibration, and I've had the experiences where it's happened, so I know it's there, I know it exists, but I can't tell you exactly how you have to do it. I simply know I've had the experience of it happening, and I know it can be, but I think it's accepting the idea that you don't have to go from A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can go from A to G without having to go through the other parts. And I think once you do that, you can shift your vibration, because that's all you're doing. You're not healing anything. You can't heal what already is, because it's a single snapshot in time. You can only change.
Well, so that's part of where we just don't have access to that memory, because if on certain levels, like I can remember part of co-creating of co-creating my journey. I have memory of that. I have memory of some of the people that I come in contact with here from other dimensions. And it's hard to comprehend that I'm going to go through a healing process, but knowing that I'm already a whole infinite being. So for me to go through a healing process or changing a vibration is something that's already been planned out. That's the only way that I can't be a whole infinite being and be an unhealed, broken being at the same time. So it has to be an illusion of dis-ease, or it has to be an illusion of sickness or separation or pain of any kind for experiences, because the two wouldn't go together. I couldn't be whole and infinite and then be limited and broken and sick. Am I making sense?
Right, without you said it's right. Yeah, it's the physical presence, the experience that we're having, or what we've already chosen. And remember, as I said, we are living in the past. So anything we're dealing with has already happened. We can't deal with something before it happens, because we can't deal with it until it does. So our injury, our sickness, our illness, as we're experiencing it, it already is. Mm-hmm. But we can move beyond that simply because we are already beyond it to begin with. We're simply holding on to that vibration because we're not ready to move forward from it. And as long as you hold on to that vibration, you're going to stay there. You're going to have those problems. You own it. And you have to be able to let go of it and understand you can move past it. And when you move past it, you're in a different reality. Some may only be, they talk about maybe one atom difference between realities, but you don't have to go in linear fashion. When you understand and accept that you're able to do beyond that, you can do it. And that's one of the things I experienced after that aspect exchange was a healing process that I was witness to. And there was a dramatic shift in Ron's body after that session. But it was simply changing. It was removing layers, like on the layers on an onion. And each of those layers is a vibration. So instead of having to go one and then so on, it was boom, 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 boom. It was simply happened. So I know it's possible. I know how it happens.
Well, I've experienced that as well. I've experienced, for me, like when you talk about the vibe. Okay, so when you're saying there's no such thing as healing, it's just another program. But then we talk about the shift of vibrations. To me, that is what the healing is. So it's like the semantics or the languaging of it, because it's when there's a shift in vibration that there's a difference in my being. And I can see the things that I do to my body or to my energy, to my life force, I guess. I can see that when I put, for example, alcohol in my body, that is something that just completely would drain the life force out of my body. And when I do it, if I do that, then I know that I am making myself sick. So if I choose to do that, then I'm choosing to be in that state at a lower vibrational frequency and also being sick. If I set my intentions and I change my vibration, if I speak something, this is how it's been for me. If something's brought into my awareness and I start to have a dialogue with it. It's like and to me, communication is one of those healing frequencies. The vibrations that we speak, sometimes in the moment when it's brought into your awareness, it automatically shifts your vibration. And what you were feeling was so traumatic, 1 minute ago, is you're at complete peace with. Like you don't feel this triggered trauma anymore.
Well, like I said, we're saying it's a matter of the healing concept is a program, because if you look from one moment to the next, as I said, each one is completely independent from every other moment. So yes, it's a healing. In our mind, we look at it as a healing because now we're different than we were before. But the reality is we didn't do anything to that before us, because that before us still exists in a reality as that before us. We're now in a different reality with a different us. Therefore, we're different than we were before. We see it as a healing, but it's really just a shifting, even though we consider it a healing. It, like you say, it can be a matter of how you look at the words and define them. But I'm looking at it at that bottom level is every moment being independent. Mm-hmm. And you can't change if everything already exists and already is, you cannot change what already is. You can become something different, but you cannot change what already was.
So really it's just integration of experiences.
You're changing everything that you experience is affecting the vibration that you are being present within, the frame, that single frame moment in space-time. And that's what we call a healing. We call that a healing. We call that a changing, getting past trauma, working through issues. But each one of those moments is separate and independent from the other. It doesn't have to be linear fashion. We can jump, we can skip, and we can do that. That's how you have miraculous healings. It's simply a change from one point A to point G without going through everything in between. Mm-hmm. And science cannot explain how the physical body can do it, because to them it cannot happen that way, but it does, which tells you it is outside of the physical process that does not exist. So it has to become something else, and it has to be outside of that, which means it's simply a shift in a present vibration to another moment in which what it was does not exist.
You want to say anything, Micah?
No, I actually sense what Ron is saying. I just, like, I sense energetically what he's saying, but my mind can't wrap its head about it. But physically, it actually, chances are I've probably experienced it myself. But it makes, like, it consciously doesn't make sense, but subconsciously it makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. It just depends on how much we buy into the program of it having to be that way. We have to accept it. We say, well, no, it has to be this way. Well, no, it doesn't. And once we move beyond that, then it starts to sink in, and you realize it doesn't have to be the way we've been told, because it's a program that holds us into the medical profession, holds us into all the stuff that was created to keep us there.
There is, oh, go ahead, Patricia.
No, you go. No, you go.
Well, because when I saw on the, Patricia, on your description, talk about vibration, I did want to propose, because I just coming through my life, especially the past few years, I think I've gone through like the New Age law of attraction thing and different meanings of the word vibration. And on a lot of the, I don't know, how do you put it? Like, people talk about law of attraction, manifesting, about raising your vibration, and a lot of these aspects of control that we really don't have. So Ronald, can you kind of explain, like, deeper into vibration? Because some people think they can raise it and there's something you can do about it, but obviously if everything already is, then you can't do it. And I don't know if it's something that you really raise as much as it's just a shift. Is that what I'm getting?
Right. And you're right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And the fact is, my knowing, my experience is that we are here to experience what we've already chosen. We are not creating it as we go along. In other words, we're not changing anything. We have the sense that we are changing it because it's different than what it was, and we think it's us. But in reality, it was a higher us, so to speak, that has already set this up, and it's already there. We're simply shifting to that. You're moving from one room to another room, but the room is already there, and the room you came from is still there too. The only thing that shifted and changed is where you are. That's the kind of the process I'm talking about. So no, can you shift it and raise it yourself? By doing, and that's actually another video I did about about talking about the fact that we think we have to do things from the human standpoint before anything can happen. And the reality is it doesn't have to be that way because it already is. Sometimes we get in the way, so to speak, but again, we can't do what we are not meant to do. We can only do what we can do. Do we shift and raise it? Yes. Are the things that we can do that make us feel and think that we're shifting and raising our vibration? Sure. But it was already going to happen. And we simply had the thoughts of what's already coming. We think it was our idea, but it's happening before we get the idea. And we get the idea as an afterthought. But we see it the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think we go in and out of different vibrational frequencies throughout our journey, where we are at a higher vibration and then a lower vibration and somewhere in between. And I'm with Ron on, that we created this reality before we came here. So even like in this dialogue, it's kind of like I told David, I was like, I want you to come join in on the conversation. He's not talking. He's kind of here against his will, I think. But but it doesn't matter. He was still supposed to be here, regardless of whether he ever says anything or if he just sits there grinning at us like that. He was going to be here, and we were going to do this together as us four, for whatever purpose it serves. It may not serve anyone outside of this conversation, but that's what it was meant to be. And so even when we're going through like what someone would call healing modalities, first of all, I've already gone through myself, tried to do healing modalities, and I've seen that they don't work. Because it's something that it's kind of keeping you in the state of like feeling like you're sick. And all it takes is for me to have a shift in my reality and what my intention for the day is, how I want to, what I'm going to do for the day or whatever. And I could be like feeling like I'm on my deathbed yesterday and feeling okay today, but I always planned for it to be that way. This idea that we have to always be like vibrating at such a high frequency that we're just enlightened beings and we're just going to fly on right out of here and ascend into the heavens, that's religion.
Yeah. But it's also new age crap too, because a lot of, you hear other voices and talking pundits, I guess, of the new age say, if you have a low vibration, something bad's going to happen to you, don't feel bad, don't have bad thoughts. And I can say from experience, I've had like the worst feelings and probably the worst vibration, and like wonderful things can happen. So yeah, none of that stuff is, it's definitely not true.
Yeah.
One of the things that's talked about in Kabbalah, one of the things that they talk a lot about is the idea that a lot of times before you're shifting to what you would call a higher vibration, you'll end up going lower. It's kind of getting yourself prepared. I guess you can compare it to a slingshot. The farther back you pull the slingshot, the farther the rock is going to shoot. So sometimes when we're what we call a lower vibration, we're feeling down, things are not going the way we want, or what's going on with this, that's preparing us to make a bigger jump forward, as long as we continue to remember that this is all the Creator's will. It's all set up for us already, and we don't lose that connection to the Creator, to our higher self. It's part of it is the testing. Are we going to maintain it, or are we going to get caught up back in the program saying, well, I feel like crap, this is terrible, this is all happening, why is this happening to me? You're changing your own vibration, and that may hold you where you are because you're not going to move forward, but then again, that's what you were supposed to do. So it's going back, 2 steps forward, 1 back, and then 3 steps forward, and then 1 back, then 4. It's that kind of a scenario. But it is all, my experiences have shown, it's all set up. There's just too many things that have happened that Ron had no understanding of, and they happened. And Ron didn't expect that or even know anything about it. So I know it's not Ron doing it. It was already set.
Mm-hmm. That's so true to me because, there's days, like, I never go, like, through, like, depression or, like, why me? But I'll get these periods where I'm like, why am I still here? What am I doing? I think I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I feel like I'm, 150,000 years old. What else could I possibly need to experience? And I just don't know what to do with myself. I do have a lot of days like that. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do next? And And I feel like that's just where you're just, I mean, I think you're just tired. I think we've done this for so long, we're tired.
What kind of look at sometimes is how many times do you have to be sick to understand what being sick is like, or how many times do you have to hit yourself with a hammer to understand that it hurts?
Yeah.
You know, and so I kind of look at that too in this life. How many times do we have to experience the same thing over and over and over again before we can call it an experience and move forward?
Yeah, some of us must really just need to be hammered a lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to share anything? Would you like to share anything, David?
No, we're good.
Oh, I had it muted. Well, I do have a question for her. Did you know she knows I think we're kind of in a computer simulation? I mean, I really believe that to a certain degree.
Like I said, we are completely different on this.
So what you're saying, I can completely believe. Each piece is like a picture. It just moves forward because it's already happened, and we're just kind of moving through the movie, if you want to call it a movie. Mm-hmm. So you're saying the vibrations are kind of irrelevant, right? I mean, trying to raise your vibration.
Well, if you're trying to think that you can go out and do something consciously to make the change in everything, it's not something that you're doing, because what you're doing was already what was supposed to be good to start with. If we're thinking that as the physical human, which doesn't really exist, is making these changes when it's not. The physical human is being used to experience those changes, but it's not making those changes.
Right.
And as you said, in the video game, every scene, every level, every character, every hidden treasure, everything is already there. But the only thing that you're aware of is where your player happens to be at the time. Right. That's kind of what it's like. It's like that type of simulation, yeah.
Well, I think video games and artificial intelligence are kind of emulating the organic reality anyway. I mean, I feel like that it's kind of like it's a creation. It's a co-creation of the co-creation that already existed. That's the way I see it. It's a different expression of a co-creation.
Yeah. It's experiencing it from all different ways and all different levels. If you look at every possible way and possibility and reality exists within that our own reality, our own universe, well, they're going to be experienced in different ways, and it has to be out to different levels. It's not just, even though everything is where we are at the time, everything else also exists simultaneously with where we are at the same time. But it's that station, it's that frequency we're tuned into, which we've already set ahead of time as to how we're going to experience what we're going to experience. In other words, you can't do what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
How does that sit with you, Micah?
Well, I was going to say, you can't not be on the path. I think I was having a discussion / argument about somebody about being on the path. And I'm like, well, you can't not be on the path. The path may not look as you want it to be, but you're always going to be on the path. I mean, it might be muddy, it might be a sea, but you're always going to be on the path. Yeah, I've definitely heard the computer simulation, and based on the explanations, it can make sense. I don't know if I put it that way, but I can see how life is like a movie, and sometimes we get so caught up in the characters or being the character. It's fine that we have a character and we respect the character, but every now and then I think it's good to pull back and just kind of watch the movie, because we're also play the role of the viewer, and that we orchestrated the movie at the same time. And we have, like, there's so many different roles than what we think. But yes, I think life is like a movie where I can see how it's meant to happen has already happened and will already happen. And like at first I really couldn't be at peace with that, but there just kind of came a moment in my life where it's like, well, maybe I'm glad it's actually playing out the way it is. And sometimes you really do have to watch. I mean, watching it doesn't mean that you don't act or think that you're making choices at low on a greater level. You're not. But I think it helps you to, we talk about pulling back from thinking that we're the character or being so concerned with the other characters in the movie. It's like, just watch the movie, and at the end of the day, it's all going to be it's all going to be okay, you know, because ultimately you orchestrated the movie just as you are the actor in the movie and just as you are the audience in the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in the movie and we got to watch the movie, and we created the movie.
Well, and see, to me, that actually has been one of the most liberating things to me, because when you can be mostly from an observer standpoint, then when you see the dramas that are playing out and everybody caught up in their roles and the back and forth, and you having to embrace certain belief systems or races or whatever, if you can just be an observer and detach yourself and just say, I'm just going to enjoy the movie, and know that you're still going to be in character. But if you're not attached to the character, then when things are happening, it's not as serious. Like there was a time in my life where, I mean, if something would occur, I mean, it would be devastating to me. Like I would be trembling, shaking, unable to deal with the situation. I still have my moments because there's things that you might experience, and it's a new experience, and so it throws you, you know, out of that observational point where, because now it's like, oh, wait a minute, I haven't experienced this before, and so now I'm going to react to this where I've experienced other things and I've learned how to be the observer in that situation, and then I'll come across another situation, I find the reaction coming up, and I'm like, oh, but I would know next time how to handle that in a different way, to where I wouldn't be reactionary. I could just take action, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes just from my own personal experience, my own observances and observing other people, sometimes just it helps to kind of, in some weird way, it helps to get wrapped up in the character to realize we're not simply the character. And I don't know why, but for me, it's provided a lot of greater appreciation for my life and my existence here. Even getting in that whirlwind of the character that I am. And it could be usually the character is like a lot of the external things, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to appreciate the character, but then when we get caught up in the character, then we think that's all there is. And you get into that oscillation, it's like, as I've heard someone put it, where you kind of feel like you have to be one thing or another, and you're splitting apart, and you're playing into those like 3D dramas. And instead of realizing, and at some point I think everyone gets to this, whether it's in this lifetime or another lifetime, where you pull back and realize, okay, I'm so much more than this, but at least I can know from being caught up in the drama of the character, like, wow, that's what that is. And when I see other people caught up in the dramas of their character, perhaps I have more compassion and see where they are in their journey. And at one point, when it's meant for them, they'll realize they've always been on the path. Part of the journey is getting caught up in the character, but eventually you realize, oh, this is part of the movie. It's not always about just getting caught up and just being the character. You're so much more than that. And that is a very peaceful thing to realize and to remember, if that's the way to put it too.
Yeah. And that's where I guess your empathy comes in, when you allow yourself to be in that character, but it also, when people do stay in that role, that's when all that pain is there that they can't resolve. And that's what I think Ron's talking about the shift in your vibration, because if you just stay in that, then you're stuck in that energy. So you have to be able to shift from that vibration.
Well, that's what I talked about earlier in the very beginning when we were talking about the race issue and the others, is that people have a tendency to buy into the identity of the external. We start identifying ourselves a certain way, and when we do that, we get caught. And as Micah was just saying, she's learned in her life, you have to stop identifying with the physical being you to a certain level, to where you don't respond just because someone says this is about this. Well, this is what you may look like. This is what you feel like, the clothing that you're wearing or where you live. You don't attach to that. And then you become the character, as you were saying. When you do that, you have to understand that that is not you. That may be part of what that role is playing for that character, but that's not you. That's not really your identity. You're not. You don't want to get stuck in identifying with something within the physical realm, because then you've limited yourself, and now you allow that identity to control your emotions, your feelings, and your entire life. Because whatever happens to that identity now has to happen to you. So you have to let go of that. As you said, we're the writer, the producer, the director, and the actor in the movie. And it all depends on what role we try to play at the time. And everyone else around us is the supporting cast But we have to learn to be able to step back, and we are not that actor too. We're everything else too.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Just a question of whose movie this is. Is this my movie and y'all all actors in my movie, or am I in your movie?
It's
Is it all of us?
It's both ways.
Both ways? That's what I thought.
Yeah. It's all, each of us have our own, what you would call our own universe, our own reality. And everyone else is playing a role within our own reality. Nothing exists outside of your universe, your reality. Everyone there is playing a role for you, and you're consequently playing a role for them. But your reality, your universe is separate from their universe, but you're also overlapped.
Right. Makes sense.
It's your movie, but you're making multiple movies at the same time. Your character is playing in several series at the same time.
That's why I'm so tired, I guess.
Yes, exactly. I wonder when we're going to start collecting those paychecks from all those movies, right? All those universes.
It's funny because there was one time when I had said to him, I was like, I feel like I'm just a character in your movie. Because I was like really frustrated because I felt like I was doing everything at that particular time in our relationship that was accommodating to him, but not to me. And I was really frustrated. And so, we've all, in relationships, you have to work, at balancing out, things. And so then it became a joke. And I'm like, no, you're in my movie. We're just kind of playing back and forth with each other. But in reality, it's like we all are in our own universe. We're all co-created. I mean, yeah, we're doing things on so many different dimensions that I just, we're tired. And it explains, a lot as to why people will feel trapped in this reality, or just like they don't know why they're here, that they feel like they've been brought here against their will. It's just because it's a intense reality.
Well, that's why people come and go in your life, in your universe, in your reality, because it is your universe. Mm-hmm. And as you change and shift your vibrations to different ones, other people come and go because their roles, their vibrations are no longer needed in your universe.
Yeah.
And some of those are simply characters, but some of they have their own universe as well, and you're no longer needed in theirs. The roles that you played for each other, you've been killed off in that series. So now you move back to the other series.
That's how I felt. I felt that way most recently. I was just killed off unexpectedly. Okay. That's a good way to put it.
Well, yeah, but I've seen that too. I see that so, really clearly, and it's always interesting to me to watch that play out, because you will be having communication with someone and you'll connect so well, and all of a sudden, when you're shifting, you'll notice that you can't even communicate anymore. And it's not that you've lost, you don't stop caring about the person, or I don't feel like someone's lesser than I am. But I'm just like, I don't know how to communicate anymore. I feel like now I've got to make conversation. And so for me, that's that point where I'm ready to just say thank you for the experience. It was, we had a great time, but for me, that's what I'm calling now closure, and moving on and going my own route, because my path is still my path. No matter, like someone may be traveling down the road with me and we may continue, there might be that fork in the road and someone's going to go right and I'm going to go right. So we're going together, and someone else is going to go left. Maybe somebody's going to keep going straight or whatever, but you just find that you'll continuously be aligned with different people. And then sometimes there'll be someone that just stays with you all along the path. But we don't really have to judge when the relationships fall apart. We can just let them go.
And that's what you have to do. When you change and shift, you have to be going with that flow. That door opens, you go through it and understand you're not leaving anybody behind. Mm-hmm. They played a role, and they may show up in another place, but you can't look at it from the emotional standpoint that you're leaving somebody behind. I got to stay connected. No, you don't. The longer you hold yourself to that vibration, the longer you stay there. You move on when you can. It's the shifting. That's each of us has our own reality. There's nothing existing in our reality except ourselves and our creator's aspect, so to speak. And it's each of us, within our own. And then we interact, we move in back and forth and play roles with each other.
I agree. Okay, I'm good. Well, I want to go over one thing before I switch. So, okay. I know this is not going to mean anything, but I still have to ask it anyway. So when we were talking about like the vibrations and the healing and everything else, when we start talking about like 5G technology and then the vaccines and the chip implants and chemtrails and all those things, if someone's not aware, let's just say I'm the average person and I'm not even looking at, I'm not a person that's even saw any kind of truth whatsoever. I'm just going through living life day to day. Do the chemtrails and the vaccines and things like that, do you see those affecting those people? Or do you feel that it only affects people that are aware of it? Or do you feel like it's just something that was going to affect you regardless? Because how do you view that? I don't know how to ask my question. Because this is something that I see where some people get really sick and other people have zero reaction to it. So what's the difference?
Well, sometimes when you're talking about people just going on in their life, a lot of those people are what I call Sims. They're background players. You know, they're there to make the scene look more realistic. It's like in a video game, in a movie, you have extras, you have other scenes in there in order to make the whole thing seem more and more real, so we buy into the concept. It's the same with those things are going to exist because they're programs. But if you're not at the vibration in which those programs are going to affect you, where you're accepting them, where they become part of your belief system, a fear system, they're not going to have an impact on you because they don't exist. And yes, you can see them, but the vibrational impact is just like people who are moving in and out of your life. These kind of things are going to move in and out depending on the vibration you happen to be at the time, as to how much impact you're going to have on you, as to whether you're buying into that program at that time or not. It's all vibration, frequency. It's kind of hard to, we have to use the words that we have available for us. You know, vibration is one thing, and it's frequency, it's tone, it just, everything operates a certain way. It can only get within that frequency what exists within that frequency. I mean, remember, your entire universe exists at that frequency. But each little shift, you're in a completely different universe from the other one, because it's independent from the one you just came from. And it may be almost identical to the one you just came from. You're not even noticing a difference. But the fact is, you are shifting and moving through these independent pictures. Otherwise, you would never shift everything, because nothing exists. There's no movement, there's no space, none of that stuff. It's all an illusionary concept in order to make it seem more real for us. We buy into it.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking, the main reason this is coming up is because, like, I will go through and experience something physical in my body. And when I've experienced it, it's typically related to, I'll discover later that we're in a geomagnetic storm, or there's some type of solar activity, or there's like a lot of earthquake activity. And I'll experience a lot of nausea with that. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, you know, I'm creating this, you know, why am I creating this? But then I'm observing it, you know, like I'm observing it in my cats too. So sometimes I'll see the same time that I'm experiencing nausea, like this whole entire week, I've been experiencing nausea, and my cats have been throwing up all over my house. So when you see a scenario like that unfold, what is that? How would you interpret that?
All frequency changes have to do with information. So there's something that's shifting within you, internally within you, that's being reflected externally, and you're now having to experience it. So there's something going on inside you, something you're getting rid of, and you're doing it through the physical means that you're experiencing it. Yes, these, what they call the astrology, the planets, all these type of things, it's all really just talking about vibrational shiftings of energies is really all it is. They're, you know, I still don't think they exist, at least as we think that they are, according to science and such, but they are a representation of energies and vibrations. And it's, as these are shifting and moving, we're moving through those vibrations, hence it's going to be affecting us a certain way as we do. Yeah, you're going to get affected by those things. You know, I was listening to some astrology recently, and the things they were talking about were exactly the things that were going on as these plans were shifting and stuff was going on in my life. I saw that they were saying the same thing. So it's an energies and vibrations that we're shifting and moving through, and we can have some awareness of that, of what's coming when we pay attention to it. But you can't accept that as the so-called gospel truth, because then again, you're holding yourself in one position. Understand it may be coming in, but look at it as a positive shift. There's more information. There's something you're changing to, and this is needed in order to do that.
Okay, when I'm throwing up in my house and my cats are throwing up, but David's not throwing up, what the hell's happening?
In his reality, it doesn't affect him that way. In his universe, whatever that information is, whatever that vibration is, he doesn't need to have it impacted him the way you are.
I think I'm going to jump over into your game a little bit more.
You need to go ahead and tell him the truth.
Give him some syrup of Epicap.
Okay. So now there's something that you shared called aspect exchange versus walk-in. So first of all, I wanted to ask you if you would share what your definition of each is so that we know what you're talking about. What is aspect exchange, and what do you see as aspect exchange, and what is a walk-in, and what was your experience?
Okay, I look at the words and what is the meaning of the words. When you hear the word walk-in, like I said, to me, in my mind, it flashes a scenario. You're walking down the sidewalk, you see a sign at a spa, a massage parlor, a haircutting place that says walk-ins welcome. It's like a random event, chance event. You hadn't planned on it. You're just going down the sidewalk, you see the sign, you turn in there, boom, you go do something that you hadn't planned to do. That to me is a walk-in. It's a random chance event. It doesn't, even though we all know that the experience is supposed to be, but in terms of the changes within our body, it indicates a random chance event. The term that I prefer to use, the aspect exchange, is when we have, let's kind of get into the aspect exchange, when you have what they could refer to as a walk-in, it is a planned set event. It's not random. It is not a chance thing to happen. Some entity's not walking down the sidewalk, sees you hanging out over there and says, hey, I want to go join them and be inside of them, kick their body out. That's not what happens. So the exchange is something that is, again, planned and set ahead of time. And these exchanges are aspects of you. You imagine yourself as a driver of a car. And the car that you're in is your body, and you are the driver. You are not the car. You are driving the car, and you have the limitations based on what that car can do at the time. You're driving a Volkswagen Bug, you're not going to go enter the Baja 500 off-road race, at least not be very successful. But if you take that Bug and you start converting it over, putting on different shocks and suspensions and engines, you can do different things with it. And let's say you sell it to somebody else. Now you have another driver in the same vehicle. And maybe they're going to be able to upgrade the vehicle versus what you were doing before. And that's, to me, that's what the aspect exchange is, another aspect of ourself. It's a part of us that is coming into our physical body in order to take us on a different direction for a different experience. If you can relate it to the idea of being in school, when you're in kindergarten, when you're in middle school, when you're in high school, college, they're all teachers. The only difference is what they're teaching you and the level they're teaching you on. And that's the same type of thing in what I call the aspect exchange. And that is where another aspect of ourself, of our soul, comes into our physical body and takes over driving the vehicle. And it's going to take us for a different experience than what the other one had before. And what she was talking about is I had the experience, I guess, probably 2 or 3 months ago now, to where I was laying in bed, and I suddenly woke up, my eyes were open, and at that same moment, I knew that I was not in the body, but yet I was in the body, and I was coming into the body at the same time. I knew at the moment that I was not Ron, I was not the body, that I was I, whatever you want to call it, the eternal part of me, so to speak. And I was coming into Ron's body at that point, is what they would refer to as a walk-in, but I call it an aspect exchange because I was getting another driver in Ron's body. And but I was aware of what was going on this time as it was happening. And I know it was happening because I looked around as though I was seeing the place for the first time. And one of the first questions I asked myself, which I thought was a little bit funny at the time, but I asked myself, did I have a dog or a cat in this life? And where were they? And then I went through and I started doing a review of Ron's life, going through his memories, going through everything he's experienced in his life that has made him who and what that role he's playing is now. The physical issues that Ron has, the emotional issues that he had, And I was able to go back through his life and view it from a completely objective standpoint with no ego involved whatsoever. There was no saying, well, he did it because of this, and then Ron's ego standing up saying, no, I didn't really mean that. There was none of that. It was simply opening up Ron Bear, looking inside as to why he did what he did, how he did what he did, and what made him become who and what he is in the role he is now. And by doing that, I was able to go back and start correcting what we call healing, fixing those problems, because we went to look at the base cause of the problems and not dealing with the symptoms as we normally do. You know, the thing that when somebody pushes your button, that pushing of your button is not the problem, because somebody wired that button in you a long time ago. You need to go back in your life and look and see, okay, where did that wiring come from? How did it get there? And once you start to go back and undo that wiring, it changes everything else. But you have to go back to the beginning. You can't go on the issue that you're dealing with now. So anyway, I was able to do that night and go through, like I say, open up Ron's soul, so to speak, completely bare, and understand without any embarrassment of anything as to why he did what he did, why he is like he is. And it has to do with the lack of dealing with emotions. And I got a lot more information out of it that night, but it's the idea that we don't deal with our emotions, and that's what causes our physical issues in our life, whether we want to put off dealing with them, whether we want to avoid them, whether we become over emotional. None of those scenarios are proper, because we're not looking at and recognizing what is causing the emotional response in us and going back to determine, where did this come from? Why do I have this? What is the base cause? And that's the only way you're going to cure it. You're not going to cure it by dealing with what happened, because remember, it's one instance there, but there's something else behind that. And that's what you have to go back in. And that's what I was able to do that night when I came into Ron. And for the next couple of days, I kept referring to Ron as an outside being, because I knew I was not. I mean, before I had an understanding before that we're not the physical. I knew that. But that night when I actually experienced it, it was down to the cellular level at that point that I knew that I was not Ron and I was not the physical body, that who and what I am, when I leave this physical body of Ron, this projection of Ron, I'll move into another one. I knew that beyond any shadow of a doubt, the very soul of my body, that the death thing, even though I wasn't worried before, it's not even a concern anymore, because I know I'll step into another car as soon as I leave this car. And what I learned also that night is that throughout our life, we have multiple drivers in our life, but every one of these drivers is us. It's an aspect of us coming in to help us through a certain portion of the experience we're having. And it's not an evil entity coming in to take you over. They're not getting in there. I've heard people talk about other walk-ins coming in and start having a fight with the soul that's in there and kick him out, and that's all bullcrap. It's all planned. It's all set up ahead of time. If they're having issues, it's because there's something else going on with them. It has nothing to do with that. There's nobody can come in and take you over or do anything else, because it's all you. Every aspect is you. And it's just kind of, and I also understood that night that the people who have a near-death experience are really having an aspect exchange, because most of them have a review of their life. They end up in a certain place. Sometimes they go see religious things. It depends on what their belief system is as to what they end up seeing. But most of them had a review of their life, and they're usually changed after that experience. And that's actually because they have a new driver. So it's taking them on a new path, not a new path, but a new part of that path that they hadn't been on before. It's like, graduating high school, now you get a college teacher that has more knowledge or has more experience. That aspect of you now moves in, is able to take you on a different journey than the one that was in you before. That one does not fight you. It doesn't stay by to give a briefing or anything else. It does what I did that night, is you do a complete review of the individuals that you're moving into. You find out what the secrets are, what's going on. Only most of the time we're not aware of that it happening, but it does happen as we go through our life. They talk about it used to happen a lot when people had trauma when they died or almost died. And that's true, because most people are not ready to understand what's happening, and they couldn't have dealt with the issue. So they have these personality changes, they have things that happen, and sure, that can happen. But it's an aspect of you. It's not something evil. It's planned, it's set up, and it's to take you in a new direction. And I know from that night that how Ron deals with things now is very different than how he dealt with things before, particularly from the emotional aspect of it, how he deals with people. And I have a lot of conversations with Ron. I'll let him start to go down his own little tangent once in a while, and then I'll stop him. And I'll tell him, why in the world are you having a fear about that? Why are you even thinking about that kind of thing? Because I'll catch Ron. I know there's a difference between the ego mind and the spirit mind, what I call the subconscious coming into the conscious connection, my inner self. I know there's a difference. And when Ron starts to get on that fear path or start to get into the reality of the emotions on this world and not dealing with it the right way, I'm able to step in and correct him and make changes so how he deals with things so we don't have the physical and the emotional problems that he had before. We're correcting that. And at the same time, I also understand that we're correcting our entire, what we call our genetic line, because we're fixing these issues, which affects all aspects of ourself. And we're bringing more parts of ourselves back into the body. And that's what the goal is. The goal is to bring our aspects back together so we become more spirit-oriented versus purely physical ego program oriented. And then we're going to be able to move beyond some of these programs. We're going to be able to do so much more of what we really can do, but we have to get past the beliefs and the limitations of the ego program we're in. You know, it's like driving that VW. We can take that VW on the Baja 500 off-road race, but we got to make modifications in order for it to work. And that's what we're doing in this body. But we still have limitations. We've accepted that.
And when you were sharing, that made a lot of sense to me. And like, I just don't, there was a time when I did have a belief system that we could be infested with entities, and that came from the religious programming. And so if there was anything that was dark inside of me, then it must be demonic, or, you know, it must be either I'm demonic or there's something demonic attaching itself to me. And now I can see that it is aspects of myself and what I wanted to experience in this reality. And there's no way, and just to think, you know, to know that your soul is who you are, your soul can't be taken away from you. Your soul can't be possessed. Your consciousness can be lowered for the experiences of this reality, but you can't lose your soul, the infinite being that you are. And then, and if something could actually get in and possess you, then how could you be a creator being that was sovereign, if something could actually get in and control you? So that's one of the problems that's where, like, even in doing interviews, I started having some issues, because I kept thinking, you know, gosh, what am I putting out there? What am I sharing with people when you're continuing to get them to look at the fact that they might have entities inside of them? And that's not really empowering. That's not helping them, or, you know, supporting them in raising their consciousness and being aware of their reality. Instead, it's like feeding that fear. And so I started really thinking about that. I'm like, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to share? And how do I want to do this in the future? And I didn't know if I wanted to do it at all, because I'm like, I don't want to keep feeding on the fears. And, you know, we are creator beings. We co-created this reality. We can't be taken over by some kind of demon or angel or anything else. We can see entities around us, but they can't take over our bodies. But there is one thing I'd like to ask you, because when you're sharing about how you were Ron in your, you know, bed sleeping, and then you saw your greater being, and you were saying that that's an aspect exchange. Are you saying that you were connecting with your greater being, or are you saying that you were actually going through some type of physical or energetic change in are you just saying that your vibrational frequency changed and you were connecting with your greater being? Because you're not like saying you had multiple aspects of yourself all at once.
Well, I think we always have multiple aspects. I think once we deal with the issues of that aspect, it becomes a part of us, maybe moves back to our soul. But what I did is I had a different driver. I had another driver come into Ron. The driver who was in there, who had helped him have all these issues and problems, needed a break. So he stepped out, I stepped in, and I took over driving Ron's vehicle. Only now I made modifications to the vehicle so that we can do different things, and it behaves completely different than the way it did before. Because what we're attempting to do is to I hate to use that term heal, but we're attempting to change the physical structure, the vibration of the structure, in order to take it on a different path to allow it to be able to have access to other vibrations. And we have that happen all the time. But it's all these entities and things that are in us. Yes, they are, but it's us. Mm-hmm. And these things that we see around us, yes, they are aspects of us. There is nothing, remember, there is nothing but us. It is all us. It's all aspects of our soul. Different representations of different energies and vibrations. And depending on where we are is what ones we are experiencing and are driving our vehicle. You can have that fear and you can think you have all kinds of things in you. And can you get something to come in you? Sure. But it's you. It's that aspect of you that is designed to drive that way. And if you want to talk to people about that, it's not to buy into the fear, it's to get them to understand that the aspects, every aspect, everything that happens inside of them is them. It's a part of them already. Don't fear it, don't hate it, don't try to loathe it, get it out. What is it there for? What is it trying to teach you so we can go back and be absorbed again and you don't have to deal with it anymore? So that you can get what we would call a higher vibrational aspect of yourself to come in. But it's not the fear. That's the whole idea. People get caught up in the fear of these entities and beings and demonic presences. And yes, they are, but it's you. It's a representation of a vibration that you are going through that you need to be able to help yourself get through. But they're all based on fear. But it is you. That's what it is. It's not fear. It's you. It's accept it. Don't fight it. When Michael was talking before about the black and the white issue, and I said about the spirit, the light and the dark, except that the light and the dark are both you. One is no better than the other. They are simply aspects of the same divided so that we can have an experience. But none is one better than the other.
Yeah, and I've shared too before, and I can really relate to what you're expressing about the aspect, I want to make sure aspect exchange, because I think, Micah, you've sat in on the conversation before, and then of course David knows this, but when I was actually doing some integration work and I saw this masculine part of me emerge, and I didn't look at it as a masculine entity that had consumed me and that attached me. I could feel that it was a masculine aspect that I had created when I was not strong enough in my feminine presence to do what I needed to do. So basically I had this masculine energy for survival in me. And once I had let go of that, I was able to release that aspect of myself. But it actually was a physical transition that I could see actually happen in my physical body and my appearance and everything when it took place. So
I had that experience here about
everything he said.
I'm sorry.
I said I really like what he said. I agree with everything he said. Makes a lot of sense. They're all aspects of ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe too.
That's what we get past the fear. Stop worrying about it. It doesn't happen without a purpose or a reason. It's there for a purpose. I had an experience. I was down in Las Vegas about a month or so ago. We're going to be moving down there, by the way, back down there where I retired from. And I was talking with a friend of mine that I had worked with down there, and I hadn't seen the guy in 10 years. And during the conversation over the next probably hour and a half, 2 hours, I was with him. He became three different people. I saw in his face, he became, one was me. I saw myself sitting there, and then I saw him as I remember him, and then I saw him become another person as we were talking about different spiritual aspects, which I've never talked with him much about before because he was never into the kind of information that I had. We had a very long conversation. As I did, he physically changed. And as you said, I watched that happen, and that was kind of fascinating to me to watch him become somebody completely different. And I understand it. It was a vibrational shifting and changing. It was aspects of myself that I was bringing back into the home, so to speak. Mm-hmm. As George used to talk about before, we're bringing everything back together, mm-hmm. and that's what we're doing as we do this so-called healing. As we're changing vibrations, we're fixing those aspects of ourself, the problems, the issues that were within that vibration, and we're bringing everything whole back to self again. And that's what it's all about, is bringing ourselves back together and dealing with the issues, particularly the emotions. And I'm telling you, At the cause of every single problem that we have on this world is our lack of emotions. And I also talk about in that what I learned that night was the people that you hear about who are adrenaline junkies, the people who are constantly trying to test their body and physically see how far they can go, what they can do. And Ron was one of those. I can tell you that now. Ron did some pretty amazing physical things because he always wanted to push himself to test. What could he do? And he was pretty successful at it. But what I understand now is that is a substitution for emotional feelings, because we look to use our senses, our external aspect of ourselves to get, instead of dealing with the emotions inside of ourselves, we're attempting to deal with it from the external portion, through that adrenaline rush, through the challenges, the physical stimulation versus the internal dealing with the emotional issues. And so the people who are doing that are probably not dealing with emotions very well. And I can tell you from experience of Ron, that was his problem. He did not want to deal with emotions. He grew up in that. And what was interesting was about in Ron's life is that almost every job he had, I was in the military, I was in the anti-terrorist team, I was in law enforcement for many years. Almost every profession that Ron was driven towards or put into had to deal with confrontations, with emotional confrontation. And Ron did not like confrontations. He was very good at dealing with people and avoiding those through his personality, but it was really avoiding. It wasn't dealing with the issues at the time. And I'm not saying he should have been fighting all the time, but he looked at it from a different perspective, and he avoided the confrontations. He avoided dealing with the emotional inside of him because that's what he grew up like. That was my home. My father and my family was not very emotionally oriented. My father was not an emotional person. If he approved, he didn't say anything. The only time you found out is when he didn't approve, and then he let you know. There was no emotions, and Ron wanted to be like his father. Unfortunately, he turned out that way, and now we have to change that, because I watched my father die because of his lack of dealing with the emotions. And that's one of the things I learned about that aspect was that, and this goes back earlier about kind of the healing concept a little bit, is that you have to understand that your brain is a computer. And I think we talked about this once before. Your brain is a computer. It has no awareness of self. If it did, it would not allow diseases to grow in the body, because it would know the host is going to die, therefore the brain's going to die. And the brain controls all the things going on inside the body. So the brain is a computer, it's a program. And what I realized was that the brain, when people who do not want to feel emotions, well, we think of the emotional center as our heart. Well, the brain says, okay, well, we don't want to feel the heart. What can I do to help stop that from happening? Well, I'm going to block it. That's why we get the block up in our arteries. And I can speak from experience. I've had 8 stents, 4 heart attacks, congestive heart failure, pacemaker, defibrillator, all put in. So I can tell you that Ron has not dealt with emotions very well. His body responded by attempting to block his emotional center, his heart. That's why we had that happen. My father still, as he had all those heart issues, did not want to deal with the emotions, so he ended up with dementia. Well, what is dementia? Dementia is separating the brain from the reality that you're in, so you no longer have to deal with the reality and the emotional aspects of that. That's what's happening from that direction. Again, it's the brain following through on the beliefs and what we're programming it. We don't want to feel. So that's why it blocks up our heart. That's why it gives us the Alzheimer's, the dementia. It's because we're not willing to deal with ourselves internally. I mean, it was a very eye-opening experience for me. And I said I had to watch my father go through this and suffer for it, but in a way, and then I thank him for it. Because you know what? It opened my eyes to understanding what was happening. So he sacrificed and suffered as an aspect of me to help me. So I very much appreciate that he did that. And I didn't like watching him go through it, but I appreciate the fact that he did that because it helped me to learn. So he was there playing a role within my universe for me to help me learn and to help Ron change and bring another aspect in so that can all happen. So it's all tied together, and we have to really, like I said, we have to look at these things from a non-medical standpoint. Why is it really happening? What's going on with us? And it's all, I can tell you, it's emotional based and lack of wanting to feel. And how do we avoid those? We got to look at our lives. Are we trying to avoid these issues? Or are we over getting into them, becoming over emotional? We've got to go back and look at the base cause of why somebody's pushing your button, why that button is even there. Go back in your life. Ask yourself, why did this happen? And you will get answers to it, but you have to go back and get the base root when that wiring was put in you. It doesn't do you any good to take out the button if you don't get the wiring. So, like I said, I can only tell people from my own experience. And I've been through a lot of that crap because Ron didn't want to deal with it, but we're changing that now. I had some what you would call the healing aspect that went on within the night or two after that aspect exchange, and it helped me to understand about the healing process because of how I was watching what was going on and what I understood, how it happened. And I didn't go from A, B, C, and D. I went, it ripped right through several layers at the time. And like I said in the video when I talked about the healing thing, it had to do with the idea that instead of taking one layer off over time, like dealing with it in a linear fashion, what I was watching going on was that they were pulling out one layer, just one vibration at a time, boom, boom, boom. Within a very short time, several vibration layers were gone. So there was a shift inside of Ron's physical body. So his physical health is dramatically different than it was 2 or 3 months ago, even though he has the same history. Where he is at now vibrationally is completely different than where he was before. Hence, the physical body is now projecting that new vibration. I'm not saying everything is gone, but the fact is there's a completely different feeling now inside of this body than what it was before. I don't feel like I'm going to drop dead anymore and the things that it can do. It's because of that shift in the vibration. It's not healing, but in a way it is a healing because we went back and fixed some problems, which allowed us to change vibrations.
Wow. Can everybody hear me? I don't know. Oh, go ahead, David.
It sounds like the upgraded Ron is in your body now. That's why you're doing well. A different version, right? An upgrade.
Well, Ron is still there, but we've switched. Yeah, we switched to a new Ron with a different vibration, and he deals with things much better now. So he's not having those build-up and problems that he had before. At least I don't think so.
Wow.
And I don't have any medical or doctor thing that I can go and show you and say this has changed, but I know it inside. I feel it. There's completely different feeling inside. But what I do find too is that Ron, because of the past experiences of being in the hospital probably a dozen times in the last 10 years from all these different issues, that I still find his mind going to those problems and issues and thinking that he's going to have something happen because of those. So he's still tied to that to an extent, and we're working on separating out that completely because as spirit driving Ron, I know he doesn't have those problems anymore, but it's trying to get Ron to let go of that emotional attachment to those problems. That's that we're having, and now we're working on it. And every day that goes by and every month that goes by, it's going to give him a little bit more, I guess, acceptance of the change. And that's where we have our problems because we don't accept the changes. It's that ego mind holding on to what was instead of letting go of it and being where we are now in a new vibration.
Yeah, I definitely think the intellectualizing of emotions is a huge problem with so many of us on this planet, and why we end up as fragmented and segregated as we do. It's like you said, we go into the physical. I know this, my dad was a football coach, and just seeing athletes and people being involved in sports, not saying that's a bad thing, but I kind of see that same thing. We invest ourselves in our work, we invest ourselves in some other kind of identity, and we get lost in that. And so we don't want to deal with the emotions, but somehow they will manifest themselves in some other way. And I've had that same experience. And, sometimes life, you realize you've organized for things just to, for you to realize that. And I realized this actually a couple of days ago, like, oh my gosh, I have a heart. Not that I didn't, but it was a different kind of resonance with me because something had been totally stripped away. It was actually a work experience. And I pretty much got killed off the show 3 hours before I thought I was going to be killed off, so to speak. But what's funny is that I wasn't even upset. I wasn't even considering money. I wasn't considering anything. It's just that how much I realized the people that I cared about, the appreciation that I had for them in my life, And it's not like, I mean, I don't know if we're going to see each other again in this life or not, but I gained so much appreciation for their presence, but also that I could feel that I really was receptive of how I was feeling in the moment. And I didn't have to just pretend like I was okay, like I usually do, just put on a straight face or play on like a different character. It's like, it was a different, like you talked about, Ron, it's an aspect of you that shows up, and it's never too late, never too early. And you,
Right.
you feel, and it's a really beautiful experience to have that. And it's like another like you said, another aspect of yourself that comes in, another aspect of you that's more receptive, another aspect of you that makes you more integrated. And for me to have that moment to feel myself and be appreciative of the role that I played and the role that these other people played in my life, it was kind of like, yeah, it makes sense that this chapter of my life is supposed to end. I'm off this part of the show and everyone else is off this part of the show. And now this part of me is here. And I actually feel it physically as well. I like how you put the exchange experience, because that makes a ton of sense, more than the whole walk-in, like, you know, kind of thing going on. And for me, it just, I knew something was different. I knew something was new within me, and I could feel it resonating in my cells, in my body, as somebody that was more integrated. And so that started happening as things started kind of dropping and letting go. And I realized that I'm in this place because I'm now ready for these events to happen, to watch these things unfold. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I was like, yes, that totally resonates with how I've been. The other thing I wanted to do, going back to the entity aspect and those being aspects of us, because I think that's really interesting. I know, like there's I guess, I don't know if it's like the label, the thing of being like an empath or highly sensitive soul. And one of the things that people have said about, you know, quote unquote empaths, not something that I totally identify with like solely, but I know that there's a sense that empaths can pick up other people's energies, and that's what they say. Is it really just other aspects of ourselves, like as you say, or is it that you are picking up other people's stuff and, you know, processing that, or just intuiting into what's going on with them? Just curious what your perspective on that is.
Well, what I'm getting is that when the empaths are doing that, they're really picking up other aspects of themselves. And everyone that they're picking up may be background players, but I'm getting that it's they're tuning into different realities, I guess you could say, at the same time. So they're getting energies and they're contributing to those around them. Because remember, the reality around us is our internal being projected. So they're getting an internal thing from aspects of themselves, and it's being projected around them, and they're associating with this or that being that's there. But the reality is it's parts of themselves that they're not dealing with very well.
Okay. I like that. That makes sense.
Well, for me, I cannot go out. I connect to being an empath, and there's just, I pick up one, and David knows this. Sometimes, like if he's not home and I sense something of danger, if he was driving down the road and there was something going to happen, all of a sudden I just get internally hot. And I get a little bit panicky, and I may call him, and he'll know that I was sensing something was wrong, because I start to have this sensation. And this happens I really can't be in a crowd of people in a certain type of energy, because I just, the energy becomes really intense. It makes my whole body start to feel shaky. And I can start to feel such anxiety. And it's not like a panic attack or anything like that. It's like an overwhelming amount of energy that floods me. And a lot of times it's because I also feel people's anger and whatever's going on with them. I can feel somebody's sadness, and I'll start to feel emotional around them. And I don't know, I mean, that's just something I couldn't tell you why I'm experiencing. I don't feel like I'm feeling aspects of myself more as I'm connecting to those beings and what they're actually experiencing. I don't know why. You know, we're set up that way, but that's just how I interpret it for me personally. Because if I could go into a room full of people and the energy is in resonance, then I'm calm. But if I go into an energy where I have, okay, let's say if it was a rock concert, for example, if you put me in a rock concert, I would lose my mind. I mean, I can't do it. I've been in that situation before, and it's not enjoyable to me on any level whatsoever. Even if I liked a song, if you put me in that environment with that large amount of people, I'll lose myself completely. So I don't know what that
maybe part of what we're going through to keep us out of those situations where we're not meant to be, because our higher aspect, the experience that we have set up is meant to direct us in a certain direction to have certain things happen. And sometimes people get this idea, well, I'm on a low vibration, that's why this is happening to me. That's why I had this problem, because I'm low vibration now. Well, the reality, that's bull. You had what you had happen, one, because it was supposed to happen, but two, because it's directing you to a certain point to do a certain thing for your next experience. Now, you may not like going through it. And I've had that recently over this last week. It seemed to have an accelerated process where we got kind of, because we're selling stuff and cleaning everything up, and things were happening, and it was like, okay, well, why did that happen? Well, then I had to go do this, which now directed me to somebody else that I needed to talk to. Well, but if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been there to talk to that person. So that happened, even though I didn't enjoy what happened, but it was to make me go to another place. See, so things happen for specific reasons, to make us go someplace or not make us go someplace. Everything has an intention behind it.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to do this again in a couple of months? I was going to go into a few more things, but we've been going, and it's like at the almost 2 hours, and I kind of I like what we're talking about, and I'd rather finish up with this and then maybe come back in a couple of months, and then we'll go through some stuff that you've shared that's kind of mind-blowing.
Okay.
If you're up to that, after you get moved.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we're moving. We should be moving next month, so we'll be fine.
Okay, in a couple of months. But I want to go back to this because I feel like this aspect exchange is so important, because I feel like that's like something that's so predominantly misinterpreted. And when you said, that what it did is it shifted you and into where you were feeling emotions, that you knew you needed to go feel emotions. Well, in the sessions that I do, and one of the reasons that I guess I'm really good at this and why I'm doing this at this point in my life, is because I was one of those people too that would suppress my emotions. And it's because when you're growing up in situations with parents that are dealing with their own stuff that's unresolved, and they're really emotional wrecks in a way. But like, you're allowed to feel emotion, then you're not allowed to feel emotion. And you start to become confused with how to feel, how to be, how to express yourself. So you just start to suppress it. And you kind of just become a chameleon, and you just adapt to any situation you're in and just be whatever you're supposed to be without being who you really are. So you just don't feel. And so in my sessions, that's the number one thing that comes up, is that people they can't feel emotions. And I'm like, it's really interesting when people say they can't feel emotions. And I've never said this to someone in a session because it would be rude. But as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, every one of us can say we've felt hurt feelings and anger. But when we're saying that we don't allow emotions, what are we really saying? I think it's really about our connecting to what authentic love is. What the emotions that exist beyond just the anger, and we feel like low self-esteem. We feel all these different emotions. So when we say we're numb and we don't feel, what are we really saying?
That we don't want to. What you have to understand, what emotions are a gauge that we use to tell us how far out of balance we are. That's all emotions are. It just shows us how far out of balance we are from center. We look at one, hate or anger on one end, love on the other end, but they're really unbalanced states, because you can't stay in those permanently, not how we experience them here. And when people, it's not that they're not, they don't want to. And it's not even a matter so much of, because feelings and emotions, there's a difference between those. It's not wanting to face the emotion and look at why they're having the reaction that they're having. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It's, you know, you can get upset. People who get upset and angry, very angry, they're having an emotional response, but that's because they're not wanting to deal with whatever it was that's making them feel that way. And that's what we need to do. It's not just having the emotions, but examining why we're feeling, as we're feeling, what's causing us to have that reaction, to go back and look at that. And then we may not have that kind of a extreme reaction the next time something happens, because now we've gone back and looked at what caused it. What do we have inside of us that's causing us to react this way when we really shouldn't be? There's no reason for it. But we're still going to have the emotions, but the idea is not to be so unbalanced, to go from one side to the other side all the time. It's to examine them and to deal with it. And once you deal with it, it starts to change the vibration, because you're changing the memory within your cells, your mind. Everything changes once you start to deal with the bottom issue, which changes what we call the healing, but it's a vibrational shift.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, feelings are different. Feelings are what you get that internal inside when you feel something is right, or you should do, or something you shouldn't do. The feelings are that connection to what we call our spiritual self, our higher self. That is feelings. That is getting in touch with feelings. Emotions are reacting, what we consider our internal reaction to our external environment through our 5 senses. And that's what our emotions are. How we're reacting to the external environment via our 5 senses. The feeling is your spiritual connection inside. So there is a difference between feelings and emotions.
So when you allowed yourself to feel your emotions, or to go through your emotions, did that create a change, a visible change for people to see around you? Like, did your partner see a difference in the way that in your state of being?
She knows the difference in how I act, in what I'm willing to say. Basically how I'm. And again, it's the feeling. I'm not sure that's really the correct thing to say on it. It's dealing with the emotions. Yeah. I say more than it is getting them. It's dealing with the emotions and examining why you're having that kind of a reaction, and then looking at it. Is that realistic? Is it something? Is it a program? Why am I reacting that way? What's causing that? It's going back and getting to the root cause of that unbalanced state, because emotions are an unbalanced state. Mm-hmm. They simply are. It's our reaction. It's out of a balanced position. So we want to look at why is that causing. Then we want to get back towards center. Yes, we're going to have emotions going back and forth. We're going to, because we're experiencing it, and that's partly why we're here. But the idea is to try to keep ourselves from going from one extreme to the other extreme, because like a pendulum, things have to go back and forth. You know, going back. And I also talk about that with the idea of the expectations. You don't want to have expectations, because expectations are limitations, and you're almost inevitably you're going to be disappointed. And every time you have an expectation that doesn't get happening, your ego mind says, "See, I told you that was all crap," and it says it's right, instead of your spiritual self speaking up. So get rid of the expectations, have anticipation, but allow it to be what it's going to be. And because your expectations are us thinking that we have to have the control, it's a whole different thing, and that's more the emotional. The expectations create the emotional rise and up in imbalance. So get away from expectations, because you also limit yourself. You can only expect what you already know. You can't get something new when you can't expect it. So let go of expectations, have an anticipation of something coming up, but allow it to flow, allow yourself to be directed where you need to go, and enjoy whatever that experience is going to be. And understand, if it's what you consider negative, it's for something you need to learn. Look at it. What am I dealing with? It also may be directing you to a certain place or position to do something else. And I've had that happen often enough. I know it. I won't say I appreciate the way it happens, but the fact it happens, and I enjoy what happens afterwards. It's the getting there. It's not so much fun sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything that anyone else wants to say before we close? No?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Good conversation.
Well, we really appreciate your participation.
Thank you, David.
I drug him here against his will. He's in my game.
In your world.
In my world.
I'm in your game.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ron, and I look forward to us connecting again soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia and Micah and everybody. David, thank you for being here, guys.
All right. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.